She sat alone at the train station, still in her wedding dress. No one came. He was just passing through, a single father with nothing left to give. But when their eyes met through the rain, something changed, not just for her, for all of them. Before we begin, if you believe in second chances, in the quiet power of kindness, and in stories that heal the heart, consider subscribing to our channel. Let's begin. The rain was soft at first, just a whisper on the roof of the old pickup truck. But by the time Eli Shepherd pulled into the gravel lot beside the train station, it had turned into a steady downpour. He cut the engine and listened. Raindrops drummed against the windshield like a slow, sorrowful lullaby, the kind that made a man remember too much. In the passenger seat, 7-year-old Caleb leaned forward, forehead against the glass. His little voice broke the quiet. "Daddy, why is that princess crying in the rain?" Eli followed his son's gaze. Across the platform, under the rusted tin awning of the almost abandoned station, sat a woman in a white wedding dress, soaked, motionless, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her heart in place. The fabric clung to her legs, heavy with water. Her bouquet, if it had ever existed, was gone. All she had was a small, rolling suitcase and a veil tangled in her hair. Eli blinked, unsure if what he was seeing was real. She looked like a ghost from another life, or maybe from his. He was about to say, "Don't stare, Caleb," but something in his son's wide eyes stopped him. It wasn't curiosity, it was concern. Pure, unfiltered concern. "She looks sad," Caleb whispered. "We should ask if she's okay." Eli hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who got involved in other people's messes anymore. He had enough of his own. Debt, grief, and a future held together by duct tape and dry hope. But the woman wasn't moving. She hadn't even flinched in the rain. With a sigh, Eli grabbed his flannel jacket and opened the door. The cold hit him first, then the sound of the rain, a wall of gray that turned everything else into a blur. "Stay here," he told Caleb. "I'll be right back." He crossed the lot, boots squishing in the mud, and stepped onto the platform. The woman didn't look up until his shadow fell across her lap. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, soft but steady. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her cheeks blotchy with tears. But even through the sadness, there was something dignified about her, something proud. She blinked as if trying to focus. I missed my train," she said, voice barely audible over the rain. Or maybe it missed me. Eli glanced at the tracks. No arrival, no departure, just silence and gray. "I can't sit here forever," she murmured. "Where were you headed?" he asked. She gave a hollow laugh. "Nowhere, I guess. I wasn't invited anymore." Eli didn't know what to say to that. She pulled the veil from her hair and folded it slowly in her lap. "It was supposed to be today," she said. "The wedding. He texted me 30 minutes before, said he couldn't go through with it, that I was too much of a risk, too much of everything, and not enough of what his mother wanted." Eli didn't react outwardly, but something in his chest shifted. He had no idea who this woman was, but he recognized that kind of pain. It sat in the bones, deep and quiet. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him like no one had asked that in a very long time. "Amanda," she said. "Amanda Blake." "I'm Eli," he said, nodding once. "Eli Shepherd." He pulled off his jacket and offered it. "You'll freeze in that dress." She stared at it for a second, then took it slowly, like it might break in her hands. "Thank you." "You hungry?" he asked. Amanda hesitated. "I don't know. I haven't felt anything since this morning." "Well," he said, tilting his head toward the truck, "my son and I have half a ham sandwich and a bag of chips. That's luxury around here." For the first time, a hint of a smile touched her lips. Ham sandwich, huh? You really know how to treat a lady. Eli shrugged. Best I've got, but it's dry. So there's that. She stood carefully, her wet dress dragging, and followed him toward the truck. Caleb rolled down his window. Is she okay? Eli glanced back. She will be. Amanda climbed into the back seat, careful not to get the upholstery too wet, even though it was already torn in 3 places. She looked at the boy beside her, who offered her the chips with a shy smile. Hi, he said. I'm Caleb. You can have the bigger half. Amanda took the bag, eyes misting again, but this time the tears felt different. Thank you, Caleb. That's very kind of you. He grinned. Daddy says kind people make the rain stop faster. Eli raised an eyebrow. I said that? Caleb nodded. Last week, when I cried about Mom's photo getting wet. Amanda turned to Eli. You lost your wife? He nodded. 3 years ago, car accident. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He didn't respond, just turned the key and let the old engine rattle to life. They sat for a while in silence, listening to the rain. 3 strangers, brought together by heartbreak, ham sandwiches, and a broken train schedule. But as the minutes passed, something began to settle, like the sound of rain washing dust off a forgotten window. Amanda stared out at the station where she'd been left behind, and maybe, just maybe, she'd been left behind so someone else could find her. The rain had slowed to a gentle mist by the time Eli parked his truck beside the small country chapel, an old, weather-worn building just off the main road, long abandoned except by memory and birdsong. Moss climbed the sides like ivy, and the faded white cross above the door looked like it had been painted in a better decade. Eli cut the engine and looked over his shoulder. Amanda sat in the back seat, still in her wedding dress, though it had begun to dry into a crumpled shadow of what it once was. Her hair clung to her neck. Her eyes were distant. You okay? He asked. She nodded, but it wasn't convincing. I figured we could wait out the rest of the rain here, Eli said. My uncle used to preach in this place. Still has a key stashed under the stone somewhere. Amanda looked at the chapel like it might collapse if she blinked. It's beautiful, she whispered, and Eli wasn't sure if she meant it or if she was just grateful for anything, not wet or cruel. Caleb jumped out of the truck, eager and barefoot now, splashing through puddles without care. He ran up the chapel steps and began looking for the key, humming as he did. Amanda watched him for a moment. He's bright, she said. Too bright, Eli said with a soft smile. He keeps me from going dark. There was something in the way Amanda turned to him then. A flicker, brief but piercing. Like she was trying to remember what it felt like to believe someone could say things like that, and mean them. Inside the chapel, the air smelled like old cedar and long-forgotten prayers. Dust danced in the fading light from the stained glass. A few broken pews still stood, angled like forgotten soldiers. In the far corner, a cracked piano rested in silence, its keys yellowed, but intact. They settled into the front row. Amanda sat carefully, smoothing the skirt of her dress, even though it was hopelessly wrinkled. Eli handed her a dry blanket from the back of the truck, which she wrapped around her shoulders without a word. Caleb found a pew just behind them and began quietly building a tower out of hymnals. For a long time, no one spoke, the kind of silence that wasn't awkward, but sacred. Then Amanda broke it. His name was Carter. Eli looked at her, but said nothing. I met him at a hospital fundraiser. He ran a chain of dental offices. Charming, smooth, everything in place. Said he liked women who knew who they were. She gave a short laugh. Turns out he liked that until his mother told him otherwise. Eli leaned back, arms folded. What did she say? That I was too mature, too grounded, too tired looking, and too close to 40. He didn't hide the wince. That's a hell of a lot of two. Amanda nodded. She said he needed someone who would photograph well. I guess I didn't pass the screen test. Eli's hands curled slightly in his lap. He had no words for cruelty dressed in fake courtesy. He called me 30 minutes before the ceremony, Amanda continued, eyes distant. Said it wasn't the right time. Said I was lovely, but not. Legacy material. Her voice cracked, whatever that means. There it was again, that weight, sitting on her chest like a stone. And Eli knew it too well. Grief that didn't scream, just pressed. You didn't deserve that, he said quietly. No, Amanda said. But I believed it. For about 20 minutes, I believed every word. That's why I didn't leave the station. I wasn't waiting for him. I was trying to decide if I still existed without him. That silenced Eli, not because he didn't understand, but because he understood it too well. I sat there, she whispered, in the dress I paid for myself. No bridesmaids, no family, no backup plan. Just me. A 38-year-old woman in a puddle of white, and nobody to tell me I was still real. She turned to him then, and then you showed up. Eli looked away, jaw tightening. Not because he was angry, but because something about her words cut deep. He remembered standing alone at his wife's funeral, holding Caleb's hand so tightly, the boy's fingers went white. And still, no one had told him he would be okay. No one told him he was real. I didn't do anything, he said finally. You stopped, Amanda replied. That's everything. Outside, the rain picked up again, pattering softly on the roof like a lullaby trying to find its rhythm. Amanda glanced at the cracked piano. Do you think it still works? Eli shrugged. Only one way to find out. She stood and crossed the dusty chapel floor. Gently, like unwrapping a wound, she lifted the lid and touched a key. It rang out, soft, sad, slightly out of tune, but alive. She pressed a few more notes, cobbling together a melody. Something familiar, something haunting. Caleb stopped building his tower and listened, chin resting on the back of the pew. Amanda played with her eyes closed, letting the music speak in ways words couldn't. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful, because it was hers. When she finished, the room held its breath. That, Eli said, was the most honest thing I've heard in years. Amanda turned, eyes shining. It's the only voice I've ever trusted. Music never lies. He nodded. Neither do little boys. And mine already likes you. Caleb grinned. Can she come with us? Amanda laughed. A real one this time. It startled her. Startled all of them. I don't even know where you're going, she said. Eli smiled. Not sure it matters anymore. Wherever it is, I think it just got better. And as the rain fell again, steady and sure, Amanda realized it wasn't trying to drown her this time. It was washing something clean. Morning came slowly, like an old friend, unsure of its welcome. The clouds hung low over the Nebraska plains, painting the landscape in muted grays and soft golds. Mist rolled gently across the fields, like it was trying not to disturb the earth below. Inside the old chapel, Amanda stirred first. She had fallen asleep curled on a pew beneath a faded quilt Eli had found in a forgotten cupboard. Her wedding dress was still damp, but no longer clung to her skin like shame. It felt softer now. Just fabric, no longer a reminder. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake Caleb, who had fallen asleep beside her, with his small head resting lightly on hers. The boy's breathing was steady, innocent. His presence had anchored her in the storm of yesterday, like a lighthouse she didn't know she needed. Across the room, Eli was already awake, standing by the open door of the chapel, one boot resting on the threshold. He was looking out into the early fog, shoulders relaxed, arms crossed. Not with tension, but with thought. Amanda stood, pulling the blanket tighter, and walked toward him. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head, glancing at her with that quiet steadiness she was already starting to trust. "Got used to early mornings on the farm. My body wakes up before my mind gets the memo." She smiled faintly. "I used to hate mornings, but today, it feels like something new." Eli looked back out into the mist. "You ever watch a storm leave?" She followed his gaze. "I guess I usually wait until the sun comes out before I look." "That's the thing," he said, voice low. "There's beauty in the leaving, too. It's softer. Honest." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the clouds break apart above the distant trees. The sound of birds returned to the world like timid guests arriving late to a gathering. A single beam of sunlight pierced the sky, slanting across the field. "Looks like we survived it," Amanda whispered. Eli nodded. "Survived worse, I imagine." She turned to him then, curious. "Tell me about her. Your wife." He didn't flinch, didn't tense, but the air around him shifted. "Her name was Lila," he said after a moment. She laughed loud, never apologized for it. She smelled like peaches in the summer and cinnamon in the winter. She made biscuits that could make grown men cry. I still don't know how." Amanda smiled gently. "Sounds like you loved her deeply." "I still do," he said, without hesitation. "But grief doesn't mean you stop living. It just means you carry someone with you differently." That hit Amanda in the chest, not in a way that hurt, but in a way that opened. "I've never been married," she said, her voice soft. Came close. "But I always seemed to be someone's temporary dream, never the forever kind." Eli looked at her then, fully. "You ever think maybe they just didn't deserve you?" Amanda looked away, blinking. "I used to. Then I stopped letting myself think anything kind." "Well," Eli said, leaning slightly against the doorframe, "maybe it's time to start again." She stared at him, unsure how someone so quiet could say things that felt like lanterns in the dark. Behind them, Caleb stirred and sat up, hair sticking in every direction. "Is it morning?" he yawned. "Sure is, buddy," Eli said. "And you're drooling on the lady's dress." Caleb blushed and wiped his mouth. "Sorry, Miss Amanda." She laughed, genuine. "You made it warmer." They spent the next hour cleaning the chapel, not because they had to, but because it felt right. Caleb picked up old hymnals and lined them on the altar like trophies. Amanda dusted the piano and opened the windows. Eli swept the floor and straightened pews like it was still Sunday somewhere in his memory. There was no plan, no destination. But for the first time in a long time, none of them seemed to mind. "I know it's falling apart," Amanda said, running her fingers along the cracked wood of the pulpit. "But this place, it feels like it remembers people." Eli looked up from where he was stacking chairs. "It does." She turned. "You think so?" "I do. Places like this hold echoes, prayers, promises, maybe even second chances." Amanda held that thought. Let it sink in. She'd been searching for a fresh start her whole life, and here, in a place abandoned by time, it felt like she had stumbled into one. By noon, the sun had fully broken through. The storm was officially gone. Caleb found a box of old candles in the back room, most of them half melted, but still usable. Eli helped him line them across the windowsills. When they lit them, the chapel glowed, not with extravagance, but with warmth. It wasn't a cathedral, it wasn't a wedding hall, but it was enough. Amanda stood near the altar, looking around at what they had made from the ruin. "I can't explain it," she said, "but it feels like I've been waiting to be right here." Eli stepped beside her. "Sometimes," he said, "God puts us where we didn't plan to be, just so we can finally stop running." She nodded, swallowing the emotion rising in her throat. "I don't know where to go next," she confessed. "Neither do I," he admitted. They looked at each other. The quiet between them was no longer awkward. It was an invitation, and just outside the open chapel door, the cross stood against the sky, simple, wooden, and weathered, but still standing. Just like them. The old chapel had no kitchen, no working stove, no dining table polished by time or generations. But that didn't matter, because sometimes the heart remembers meals not by the food, but by the hands that shared it. Eli stood behind the truck, digging through a small cooler he kept for emergencies. Inside were 2 apples, half a block of cheddar wrapped in wax paper, and a loaf of bread a day past fresh. A plastic jar of peanut butter rolled to the side. He glanced at Amanda, who was sitting on the chapel steps with Caleb beside her. The boy was explaining how frogs sometimes pretend to be rocks to avoid being eaten. She listened like he was teaching her the mysteries of the universe, smiling with that soft, open expression Eli hadn't seen in a woman in years. He came back with what little he had. "I hope no one's expecting gourmet," he said, setting down the items on a pew they pulled forward to serve as a makeshift table. Amanda stood and joined him, taking the bread into her hands. "You're kidding? This is better than most first dates I've had." Caleb beamed. "I love peanut butter and cheese." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Together?" He nodded eagerly. "Daddy says it's a man's invention." Eli shrugged. "Desperate times. And it sticks to your ribs." Amanda laughed, and together they began assembling the odd little picnic, slicing cheese with a pocket knife, spreading peanut butter with the back of a spoon, dividing the apples with a precision that would make a surgeon proud. They sat in a circle on the chapel floor, candles still flickering in the window behind them, the sun warming the wooden walls. For a moment, it felt almost sacred. Halfway through her sandwich, Amanda set it down in her lap and closed her eyes. "This reminds me of my mom," she said quietly. Eli looked at her, curious. "She used to pack peanut butter and apple sandwiches for school, even when we didn't have enough for dinner. Said it was her way of sending me strength." Amanda smiled, eyes still closed. "I used to hate them. Thought they were poor kids' food. Now I'd give anything to taste one again." Eli's voice softened. "Is she still around?" Amanda shook her head. "Passed 3 years ago. Cancer. The quiet kind. Didn't scream, just whispered until it was too late." "I'm sorry," Eli said. "She died 2 weeks before I met Carter," Amanda continued, opening her eyes. "He didn't like to talk about grief, said it made things too heavy." "That's not grief's fault," Eli said. "It's just honest. People don't like honesty unless it's pretty." She looked at him then, not with surprise, but with something close to relief. "I think you might be the first man I've met who doesn't try to fix broken things with silence." Eli smiled faintly. "Silence never fixed anything for me. It just made the echoes louder." Amanda nodded slowly. Yeah, that's exactly what it does." Caleb finished his sandwich, then started rummaging through the hymnals again. "Do you know any songs?" he asked Amanda, holding one up. She smiled. "A few." "Can you sing one?" She hesitated. "Only if your dad promises not to laugh." Eli raised both hands. "Not even a smirk." Amanda cleared her throat and began humming softly. Then, in a voice rich and warm with a subtle ache, she sang an old hymn. "Come, thou fount of every blessing." Her voice filled the chapel like sunlight through stained glass, soft and sure, imperfect, but pure. Eli didn't move, didn't breathe. It was like watching something bloom in winter. When she finished, Caleb clapped once and then hugged her without warning. "That was better than the radio," he said. Amanda hugged him back, her eyes wet. "Thank you, sweetheart." Eli looked away, pretending to fix the peanut butter lid, but his chest was tight. It wasn't the song that got to him. It was what came after. Silence. The kind that doesn't leave you feeling empty, but full. As the afternoon stretched on, they stepped outside for fresh air. The rain had washed everything clean. The dirt road leading to the chapel shimmered in the sun, steam rising like the earth was exhaling. Amanda wandered to the edge of the small graveyard behind the building. She knelt beside a headstone so old the name had worn away. She touched the stone gently, reverently. "I think someone loved you," she whispered. "And I think maybe that's enough." Eli watched her from the distance, giving her space. He remembered what it felt like to need silence for healing. Not solitude, but the kind of quiet where someone was near, just not asking anything. When she returned, Amanda looked calmer, lighter. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For letting me feel like a person today. Not a mistake. Not a problem to be solved." Eli met her gaze. "Amanda, you were never unwanted. You were just waiting to be seen." She looked like she might cry again, but this time she didn't. Instead, she stood taller, like something had shifted inside her. A tiny resurrection. That evening, they gathered candles again, lit them anew, and sat on the chapel steps watching the last of the sun bleed into the horizon. Eli didn't say much, but he didn't have to. Amanda leaned her head gently against his shoulder, and Caleb curled up beside her with a blanket over his knees. And as the crickets began to sing and the night settled around them, Eli thought, maybe kindness doesn't fix everything, but maybe, just maybe, it gives people enough light to find their way again. By late morning, the sun had dried the chapel steps and warmed the old pews to a comfortable hum. Birds darted in and out through the broken window panes, unbothered by the presence of 3 unlikely companions who, for one fleeting weekend, had made a sanctuary of ruin. Amanda stood near the doorway, fingers brushing the now rigid hem of her wedding dress. It had dried overnight, but the weight of it, emotional more than physical, still clung to her like a second skin. She had slept in it, cooked in it, sat on splintered wood in it, and now, after everything, it felt less like a gown and more like a costume she was no longer willing to wear. Eli entered from outside with an armful of chopped firewood. He paused when he saw her standing there, hands clenched at her sides, expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked gently. Amanda nodded, but then shook her head. "No," she said, almost like a confession. "Not really." He didn't press. He simply set the wood down near the hearth and waited, the way you wait for a storm that isn't yours to stop. "I need to take this off," she said finally, voice raw. Eli glanced at the dress but said nothing. "I've been dragging it around like it means something," Amanda continued. "Like if I just hold on long enough, it'll turn into something else. But it won't. It was never worn for love, just expectation. Image. Hope, maybe. But not love." Eli took a slow breath, nodding once. She turned from him and walked toward the back of the chapel, where a small storage room still held remnants of church life, baptismal cloths, torn Bibles, broken candle stands. 10 minutes later, she re-emerged. Gone was the white dress. She wore a simple flannel shirt of Eli's, too big in the shoulders, sleeves rolled up, tucked into a pair of jeans someone had left folded in a cupboard. Her hair was pulled back loosely, damp from being rinsed in the chapel's rain barrel. She looked more like herself than she ever had before, and Eli saw it. The quiet relief, the subtle reclaiming. Amanda carried the dress carefully in her arms as she stepped outside, each footfall measured, purposeful. The wind tugged at the hem gently, like it, too, was ready to let go. Eli followed behind her, but didn't ask questions. She walked to the tree just beyond the chapel, an old, gnarled oak that stood alone like a sentry to memory. Beneath its shade, she laid the dress across a wooden bench, the fabric catching the light like glass. Then, without drama, without tears, she sat beside it and stared ahead. Eli waited a few feet away. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, but steady. I thought that dress would change everything. Thought it would make me feel chosen. Beautiful. Worth it. She looked down, but all it ever did was remind me I was waiting for someone to love me loudly enough to prove I wasn't broken. The silence between them was long, but it wasn't empty. Eli stepped forward. "Can I sit?" She nodded. He lowered himself beside her, elbows on his knees, not looking directly at her. "I remember the last time Lila wore her favorite dress," he said quietly. It was blue, cotton, real soft. She wore it the day Caleb took his first steps, said she wanted to be comfortable while chasing him. Amanda turned slightly toward him. "I held on to that dress for over a year after she passed," Eli continued. "Folded it. Washed it. Never wore it, obviously, but I'd lay it beside me sometimes, just to remember what life felt like when she was in the room." He paused. The wind moved gently through the trees. "One morning, I took it out to the clothesline. I hung it up, watched it dance in the wind, and then I let the wind have it." Amanda stared at him, eyes glossy. "I'm not saying you should burn it, or bury it," Eli said. "But maybe you don't have to carry it anymore." They sat in silence for a while longer. Caleb's laughter drifted from inside the chapel as he played with an old harmonica someone had left behind. Amanda eventually stood, gathered the dress into her arms again, and walked it to a tree stump nearby. She folded it neatly, like she was tucking away a part of herself, and laid it down. She turned to Eli. "I'm done letting symbols define me." Eli smiled. "You were never the dress." She stepped closer. "And you're not the grief." For a heartbeat, something hung in the space between them, unsaid, fragile, sacred. Then Amanda reached out and took his hand. Not because she needed saving, but because he didn't try to save her. Later that afternoon, a light rain began to fall again. Not heavy, not cruel, just soft enough to patter across the chapel roof like a familiar melody. Amanda stepped outside and looked toward the stump. The dress was still there, soaked once more. But this time, it didn't hurt. This time, the rain felt like blessing. And Amanda, finally free of fabric and false promises, lifted her face to the sky and let it wash her clean. The rain had come and gone again by the time the late afternoon sun stretched across the horizon like a lazy cat. The fields shimmered gold beyond the chapel, and steam rose gently from the warming earth. It was the kind of quiet that only came after a storm, a stillness full of breath and promise. Amanda sat on the chapel steps, arms wrapped around her knees, her borrowed flannel shirt soft against her skin. She watched Caleb chase a grasshopper through the overgrown yard, his giggles echoing through the open doorway like music played on sunlight. She hadn't smiled this much in years. Eli was inside, mending the chapel door that had started to creak on its hinges. He worked slowly, rhythmically, like someone who found peace in fixing small things even when the big things couldn't be undone. Amanda watched them both, father and son, as if she were watching a memory unfold before it became one. "Miss Amanda?" Caleb called suddenly, breathless from running. "Yes?" He jogged over, cheeks flushed and hair sticking out wildly. He held out a slightly crushed dandelion. "For you," he said. "You're the only girl here, so it's kind of a rule." Amanda chuckled, taking it carefully. "A rule, huh?" "Yup," he said proudly. "Daddy says girls should always get flowers, even if they're just weeds." She looked toward the chapel door where Eli was working, a faint smile on his lips as he pretended not to hear. "Well?" she said, tucking the dandelion behind her ear. Then I guess I'm honored. Caleb plopped down beside her on the step, letting his legs dangle. Do you miss your mom? He asked, his voice softer now. Amanda blinked at the question. It wasn't abrupt. It was sincere, the way only children could be. I do, she said honestly. Every day. What about you? Do you miss yours? Caleb shrugged. Sometimes. Mostly when I'm sick or scared, or when I want to tell someone a secret. Amanda swallowed. I bet she was amazing. She was, he said. But I think, maybe she sent you. Amanda turned her head, eyebrows raised. Me? He nodded. You showed up right when it started raining, just like in fairy tales. She laughed, trying to brush it off. I'm not a fairy tale, sweetheart. Yes, you are, he said matter-of-factly. You came in a white dress crying, and now you're not crying anymore. That's magic. Amanda looked away, her throat tightening. And, Caleb added shyly, I think if I had a mom again, it could be you. Time paused. The breeze stilled. The world hushed itself. Amanda turned to him slowly, her heart pounding. Why would you say that? Caleb looked down at his shoes. Because you talk to me like I matter, like I'm not too small to understand big things. Amanda blinked, tears rising. You do matter, more than most grown-ups I've met. He smiled. Then maybe we match. Inside the chapel, Eli had stopped working. He leaned quietly against the doorway, listening, his eyes never leaving them. He had watched Amanda with caution at first, not because he didn't trust her, but because he couldn't afford to trust something that might leave again. But now he saw something different. She didn't flinch when Caleb was loud. She didn't shush him when he asked questions adults found inconvenient. She didn't talk down to him. She leaned in. She listened. That was what made the difference. When Amanda and Caleb came back inside, the mood had shifted. Subtle, but sure. Amanda helped prepare dinner. If a can of baked beans and 2 dented tins of peaches could be called that. She stirred the pot over the fire Eli had built in the old hearth, humming quietly, while Caleb told her stories about dinosaurs and robots, and why dragons probably just moved underground. Eli watched from the side, arms folded across his chest, heart heavy with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. After dinner, they sat on a blanket outside beneath the first stars. The sky was wide and clean, the kind of night sky that made you believe someone bigger was watching. Caleb dozed off in Amanda's lap, the soft rhythm of her fingers in his hair lulling him to sleep. Eli came and sat beside her, silent for a while. He's never said that before, Eli said finally. Amanda didn't pretend not to know what he meant. I didn't plan for it, she replied. It just happened. I know. She looked down at the boy resting against her chest. Do you mind? She asked gently. Eli turned to her, the firelight catching the edges of his worn but handsome face. I don't know what this is, he said honestly, but I know it feels good. Real. And I haven't had that in years. Amanda looked at him, truly looked, at the wear in his eyes, the quiet strength in his hands, the ache that never turned bitter. I don't want to be a replacement, she whispered. For her. For anything. You're not, he said. You're something else entirely. They sat in silence, letting that truth settle like dew. Then, without a word, Amanda leaned her head against his shoulder, just as Caleb had leaned into her. And for the first time, the 3 of them fit together. Not perfectly, but honestly, like a family not chosen by blood or vows, but by healing and hope. Far above them, the stars blinked gently. And somewhere in the quiet space between heartbeats, Amanda heard the boy's words echo again. Maybe we match. The candles burned low as dusk folded into night. Their flickering light spilled across the worn chapel floor, casting long shadows that danced gently on the walls. Outside, crickets sang in chorus, and the moon, just past full, hovered like a silent witness above the fields. Inside, the three of them sat quietly, Amanda on the front pew, Caleb curled against her side with his head resting in her lap, and Eli seated across from them on the old altar steps, arms resting on his knees, watching. There was a hush in the chapel, not empty, but full. The kind of stillness that came after something had quietly changed. Amanda's hand moved rhythmically through Caleb's curls. He was fast asleep, his small body finally giving in after a day of laughter, running and healing far deeper than even he could understand. Eli broke the silence. "He wants this," he said. "Us. All of it." Amanda looked up, her eyes calm but searching. "And you?" Eli hesitated, but only for a moment. "I want to stop waiting for a perfect time to live again," he said. "I've been holding my breath for 3 years, Amanda. And for the first time since Lila died, I feel like I've come up for air." Amanda looked at the flickering candles, letting his words settle. "I don't have a job," she said quietly. "No money. No address. Just a bag and a dress I left in the rain." Eli smiled softly. "Then we're perfectly matched. I've got debt, a rusted pickup, and a barn with holes in the roof." They both laughed, quietly, deeply. The kind of laughter that follows too many tears and feels like a small rebellion against despair. "I don't know what this is yet," Amanda said after a while. "It's too new, too raw. But I know it's good. I know it's real." Eli leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Then maybe we don't need a definition tonight. Maybe we just need a promise." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "A promise?" He nodded. "Not the kind with flowers and crowds and matching rings. Just something said between two people who've lost enough to know how rare this is." He stood slowly and walked toward the altar. He lit a fresh candle and set it in the center of the railing, its glow steady and warm. Then he turned back to her, his voice steady. "Lila and I married in this very chapel. It was raining that day, too. Everyone said it was bad luck, but she said it meant God was washing the world clean for us." Amanda stood, gently laying Caleb onto the pew, tucking a blanket over him. She joined Eli at the front, heart pounding not with fear, but with something fiercer. Hope. He held out his hand. Amanda took it. "I don't have a ring," he said. "I'm not wearing a dress," she replied. He smiled. "Perfect." They stood there, two weathered souls lit only by candlelight, beneath a wooden cross and the cracked stained glass window that bathed them in fractured color. Eli spoke first. "I vow to never silence your truth, to never fix your sadness, but to sit with you through it, to never ask you to be less, or different, or softer than you are." Amanda's eyes brimmed, but she held them open. She took a breath and answered, "I vow to honor what you've lost, without asking you to forget it. To love your son not like he's mine, but like he's already part of my heart. And to choose this, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Instead, Eli pulled her into a quiet embrace. Solid, grounded, warm. Amanda sank into it like shelter. The candle between them flickered once, then steadied, and from the pew behind them, a small voice whispered sleepily through the stillness. "Are you married now?" They turned to see Caleb blinking, sitting up, hair tousled. Amanda smiled, her heart aching in the best way. "Do you want us to be?" Caleb rubbed his eyes. "I thought you already were." Eli chuckled and scooped the boy up into his arms. "Well then," he said, "I guess we better catch up." They spent the rest of the night curled on blankets near the hearth. Caleb nestled between them, fingers still holding Amanda's hand even in sleep. Eli laid awake for a long time, listening to their breathing. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know how they'd explain this to the world, if the world even needed to know. But for the first time, the future didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a path. And beside him, Amanda slept with a peace he hadn't yet seen in her. No tension in her shoulders, no tear tracks on her cheek, just rest. True rest. Outside, the moon climbed higher, casting silver light through the window. The candle still burned on the altar, a small flame against the dark. And in the chapel that once held his sorrow, Eli had made a new vow. Not to replace what was lost, but to honor it, by beginning again. Sunday morning came with the smell of wood smoke and wildflowers. The sun filtered gently through the stained glass window, casting hues of rose and sapphire across the chapel floor. Amanda stood by the open door, barefoot on the cool wood, watching the light dance across her toes. The peace in her chest felt unfamiliar, like a song she used to know, but hadn't sung in years. Behind her, Eli poured black coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. He handed one to Amanda, brushing her fingers briefly, then leaned against the doorway beside her, sipping slowly. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Caleb snored gently in the corner, wrapped in an old quilt, his toy harmonica clutched like a talisman in one hand. Amanda took a sip, then smiled. "It's terrible. I never said I was good at making it, just consistent." They laughed quietly, and in that moment, the silence wasn't just full. It was sacred. Around mid-morning, the gravel road leading to the chapel stirred with life. A beat-up red truck rumbled over the hill, then another, then a dusty station wagon. One by one, vehicles pulled in, hesitant at first, then with purpose. Doors opened, feet stepped out, voices carried on the breeze. Amanda stepped back, startled. "Are we expecting someone?" Eli squinted at the convoy, a slow grin spreading across his face. "I might have mentioned something to my uncle," he said, and I guess he might have mentioned it to a few folks. Amanda turned to him, half in awe, half in panic. "Eli," he set his mug down, "you don't have to do anything, I promise. But you should know, this chapel isn't as forgotten as it looks, and neither are you." The first to reach the chapel was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair tied back in a bright red bandana. She carried a basket of muffins and smiled like she already knew Amanda by heart. "You must be the bride," she said gently, offering the basket. "I'm Maggie. Lila was my niece." Amanda froze. Maggie took her hand. She'd be glad he found someone who didn't run from the quiet. Amanda swallowed. "I don't know what to say." Maggie leaned in. "You already said it. Just by being here." Others followed. Neighbors, old friends, former parishioners. One by one, they brought food, folding chairs, hand-picked flowers, even an old violin. No one asked for explanations. No one needed a formal invitation. They were there because kindness travels fast in small towns, and word of a woman left at a station who found shelter, and something more, had reached the right ears. Amanda stood at the doorway, overwhelmed. "How do they know?" she whispered. Eli came beside her, his voice low. "They don't need the details. They saw the candlelight in the windows last night, and figured someone was brave enough to begin again." Within an hour, the chapel had transformed. Bunting was strung across the front pews, using twine and old lace. Dandelions and wild violets filled old mason jars on the windowsills. Someone found a working radio and played soft hymns through the static. And just before noon, it began to rain. Not a storm, Not a downpour. Just a soft, steady mist, like heaven was exhaling. Amanda stepped outside and lifted her face to the sky, eyes closed, arms open. The droplets touched her skin gently, tenderly, as if the world were whispering. This time, it's different. Eli joined her, slipping his hand into hers. Caleb ran out barefoot, spinning in slow circles, laughing as the rain kissed his cheeks. "Are we doing it again?" Amanda asked, still smiling. Eli looked at the people gathered under umbrellas and overhangs, all of them watching, not with curiosity, but with quiet joy. "If you're willing," he said, "this time with a few witnesses." Amanda nodded once. "Then let's." Under the chapel's old oak tree, with rain falling like lace around them, Eli and Amanda stood hand in hand. Maggie stepped forward with a Bible that had once belonged to Lila. Her voice was steady, kind. "No rings, no rehearsals, just vows," she said, "and hearts open enough to be seen." Eli went first. "I vow to walk beside you, not in front or behind, to build something with you, even if it's from what's broken, to be the quiet in your storms and the laughter in your calm." Amanda took a breath. "I vow to choose you, not once, but daily, to hold your son with the same wonder I hold you, and to love without pretending, without performance, only presence." Maggie nodded. "Then, by the strength of the community that surrounds you, and the rain that has never washed you away, but brought you together, I bless this union." Caleb clapped, louder than anyone else. "They're really married now?" Everyone laughed, and just as Amanda leaned in to rest her head on Eli's chest, thunder rumbled gently in the distance, not threatening, but approving, like a drumbeat from the heavens. That night, after the last guests had left, and the candles had burned low once again, Amanda sat at the altar steps, holding a single wildflower someone had placed in her hand. Eli came behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Still overwhelmed?" he asked. She leaned back into him. "A little." "You want to go back to the station?" he teased. She laughed. "Never again." They sat in silence, Caleb sleeping nearby on a pile of quilts, and above them, in the chapel that once held sorrow, joy now echoed. Soft, persistent, real. The barn had been falling apart since before Eli's father passed. It leaned to the right like it was tired of standing, its red paint chipped down to flaking whispers, and the roof sagged in places where time had done more damage than any storm. Most folks in town called it a lost cause. But Eli wasn't most folks. And Amanda, well, she saw things differently now, too. They stood side by side in the golden haze of afternoon. Caleb perched on the old fence beside them, a lollipop in his mouth and a big straw hat falling over his eyes. "So, this is it," Amanda said, eyeing the structure with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Our fixer-upper?" Eli crossed his arms, squinting against the sun. "More like a fixer from the ground-upper." Amanda glanced at him. "Are you serious about this?" Eli looked at her. Not the barn, not the mess, but her. "I've never been more serious about anything." She let out a long breath, then smiled. "All right then, let's build something." They started that very afternoon. Eli retrieved his toolbox from the truck. Caleb grabbed his plastic hammer, and Amanda rolled up her sleeves. Together, they cleared debris, pulled out rusted nails, and swept decades of dust from the wide wooden floor. Neighbors stopped by, just like they had at the chapel. Some brought tools, others old doors and window frames. A retired carpenter named Hank offered to help fix the roof in exchange for Amanda's peach cobbler. After one bite of her muffins, he claimed she had hands blessed by someone's southern grandma. By the end of the week, the barn had changed. Not into a house yet, but into a possibility. Amanda sat on a bale of hay in the middle of the floor, hair tied back with an old bandana, sawdust on her jeans, and a kind of joy in her face that no one had seen in a long time. This floor could be a kitchen, she said, eyes scanning the space. And over there, bedrooms, one for Caleb, one for us. Eli, standing beside her with a pencil tucked behind his ear and wood shavings on his shirt, just nodded. I want it to smell like cinnamon in the fall, Amanda continued, and fresh paint in spring. I want a coat rack by the door and a shelf for books no one has time to read. She paused, then looked at him. I want this to feel like a beginning, not a compromise. Eli leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Then we'll build it that way. The days blurred into each other in the best way. Amanda learned how to sand wood, hang drywall, and argue lovingly over the color of front doors. Eli learned that Amanda worked best with music in the background, and that her humming meant she was happy. Caleb named every tool in the toolbox: Hammy the hammer, Naily the nails, Measure the measuring tape, and kept up a running dialogue with them as he supervised construction like a miniature foreman. But amid the laughter and sawdust, there were moments of stillness. Like the evening Amanda stood in what would soon be their bedroom, running her fingers across a beam carved with the initials E+L. She used to sit here, Eli said quietly, appearing beside her. Lila. This was her thinking spot. Amanda nodded. I don't want to erase her. Eli met her eyes. You're not. You're building beside her. And Amanda understood then. This wasn't a home built on forgetting, but on honoring and continuing. One morning, as Amanda scrubbed paint from her hands on the porch, a white SUV pulled into the driveway. She tensed for a moment, unsure of who it could be. But then the driver stepped out, an older man with thick gray eyebrows and a wide smile. Mrs. Blake? He asked. Amanda stood. Yes? I'm Robert Lane. You took care of my wife 2 years ago. Cardiac arrest at St. Joseph's. You were her nurse. Amanda blinked. I remember. She was strong. I think she scared half the staff. Robert chuckled. Still does. He looked toward the barn, where Eli was working on window frames with Caleb. I heard about the chapel. And this place. I own a few local supply warehouses. My wife said, if we ever found the woman who prayed beside her that night, we'd help her build anything. Amanda's breath caught. You don't have to. I know, he interrupted kindly. But we want to. The next day, truckloads of wood, shingles, piping, and flooring materials arrived. Eli walked through the delivery in stunned silence. Amanda wept, openly, gratefully, while Caleb jumped up and down, shouting, We're rich in wood! We're rich in nails! By the end of the month, the barn had transformed. The roof no longer sagged. The front porch wrapped around like an embrace. The bedroom walls smelled of pine, and the kitchen windows framed every sunset. They didn't have everything. But what they had, they built with their own hands, and with the hands of a community that believed sometimes second chances come in the form of a hammer and hope. One night, Amanda stood at the threshold of the new front door, her hands on her hips, paint in her hair, a light in her eyes. She turned to Eli. Do you realize what we've done? Eli nodded. We turned broken wood into a home, she smiled, and broken hearts into something whole. Behind them, Caleb's laughter rang through the hallway, and outside, beneath the stars, the barn that once bowed beneath time now stood tall again, reborn, repurposed, radiant. Just like them, the attic of the newly finished house still smelled like fresh timber and hope. It was a small space, barely tall enough to stand in fully, with slanted ceilings and a single square window that looked out over the wheat field behind the barn. The golden light of late afternoon poured in through dusty glass panes, catching particles in the air like dancing memories. Amanda sat cross-legged on the floor, an old shoebox in her lap. She hadn't meant to find it. She was looking for Caleb's missing sketchbook. He had a habit of leaving things in the most inconvenient places, but instead, buried under a pile of winter coats she hadn't unpacked since moving in, was the box. She knew what it was before she opened it. Letters. Dozens of them. Some sealed. Some torn. All written in her handwriting. Letters she had never sent. To Carter. To her mother. To herself. She brushed her fingers across the topmost envelope, yellowed at the corners, and exhaled. She carried the box downstairs. Eli was on the back porch, shelling peas with Caleb on a little bench they'd built together. The boy was humming off-key, swinging his legs while Eli told him some exaggerated story about a rabbit who built his own car. Amanda paused in the doorway and smiled. She didn't want to interrupt. So she turned and went to the chapel. It was still there, just beyond the edge of the field, untouched since the day of their small, rain-blessed wedding, a little weathered, but still standing. The door creaked the same way it always had. She stepped inside. The air was cool and quiet. Dust lingered in the beams of fading light. The pews remained, and the candle she and Eli had lit that night still sat on the altar, now just a stub of wax. Amanda knelt at the first pew and placed the shoebox on the seat beside her. One by one, she pulled the letters out. The first was addressed simply, "To the man who left me at the station." She opened it. "I waited for the sound of your footsteps on the platform until the silence became louder than anything else in my life. I wore a dress that cost more than my rent, carried dreams I stitched together alone. You never showed up, and somehow I still waited another hour. Not for you, for someone to tell me I hadn't imagined everything." Amanda folded it gently. She didn't cry. Not this time. The second letter was to her mother. "You were gone before I figured out how to forgive you, but I kept your voice in my head every time I wanted to quit. That raspy laugh when I told you I'd be married by 30. That tired smile when I turned 35. I think you knew. I think you hoped I'd find someone who saw me without the makeup, the performance, the armor. I have, now. His name is Eli." The third letter was the one that shook her hands. There was no name on it, just, "To the woman I used to be." She opened it slowly. "You weren't too old. You weren't too unwanted. You were tired, and bruised, and aching to be seen. But you were never less. Not for 1 second. And I'm sorry it took you falling apart at a train station for the world to notice. But you stood back up, and you walked, mud-soaked, mascara smeared, into a stranger's truck. And somehow, that man handed you back your name. You should be proud of her, because I am, and I finally know how to carry her. With grace." Amanda exhaled, folding the letter with reverence. She placed all the pages back into the box, stood, and walked slowly to the altar. With trembling hands, she lit one of the old candles, then set the box beside it. She didn't need to burn them. She didn't need to bury them. She just needed to leave them, in the one place where she had been found. When she returned home, the sky was turning soft shades of lavender and gold. Eli was inside with Caleb, reading from a book about stars and their stories. Amanda stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then Caleb looked up and grinned. "There's our mom." Amanda blinked. It wasn't the first time he'd called her that, but it was the first time he'd said it like it was never in question. Eli turned and smiled at her, not surprised, not hesitant, just home. She crossed the room, leaned down, and kissed the top of Caleb's head. "Tell me about the stars," she whispered, and the boy began again, as if she'd never left. That night, Eli found her standing on the porch, looking up. "You all right?" he asked. Amanda nodded. "I think I finally forgave myself." Eli stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "For what?" "For thinking I wasn't enough," she said. "For believing someone else had to pick me for me to feel chosen." Eli pressed his forehead gently to hers. "You were never waiting to be chosen, Amanda. You were waiting to see yourself." She smiled. "Well, I saw her today. Was she beautiful?" "She was tired," Amanda said. "But yes, she was." They stood in silence, the stars above them blinking gently, stories waiting to be named. The summer sun had not yet risen, but the house was already stirring with quiet life. In the kitchen, Eli stood barefoot, brewing coffee while the floorboards creaked softly beneath him. A scent of cinnamon and warm butter drifted from the oven where Amanda's homemade scones were baking, her Sunday morning tradition. Caleb was still asleep upstairs, wrapped in dreams, and the quilt Amanda had stitched from old shirts and soft memories. Eli took his mug and stepped out onto the porch. The wheat field stretched before him, golden and full, swaying in rhythm with the early breeze. Behind him, he heard the soft click of the door and turned to see Amanda stepping out. Barefoot, her robe knotted loose at her waist, hair still tousled by sleep. She carried her own mug, painted clumsily by Caleb for Mother's Day, and leaned against the porch rail beside him. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, voice still husky. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sky turn slowly from charcoal to lavender. Birds began to stir in the trees, calling softly to one another, as if agreeing to greet the day gently. Then Amanda placed a hand on her stomach. Eli glanced over, and she smiled. "I felt it again," she whispered. He set his mug down, turned toward her fully, and placed his hand over hers. A tiny flutter. A miracle. They had been told it was unlikely, near impossible actually, but Amanda had always believed that love could rewrite expectations. And now, here it was. A quiet heartbeat joining theirs, steady and sure. Later that morning, the three of them made their way down to the chapel. It had become a ritual now, one that Caleb insisted on, even if it was just for a few minutes. They'd open the doors, let the air in, and light a single candle at the altar. Sometimes they'd sing. Sometimes they'd sit in silence. Today, Caleb ran ahead, already humming some tune he'd half invented, half remembered. He flung the doors open with dramatic flair. "Mama!" he called, turning back. "I think today feels like something," Amanda laughed, holding Eli's hand as they approached. "Something like what?" Caleb grinned. "Like rain." Amanda tilted her face upward. The sky was cloudless. "No rain today, buddy," Caleb shrugged. "Not yet." Inside, the chapel looked as it always had, worn but whole. The candle was lit. The pews stood firm. And Amanda's shoebox of unsent letters still sat where she had left it, untouched. They took their seats, Amanda and Eli side by side. Caleb sprawled across two pews, humming softly as he stared at the colored light spilling from the window. Amanda rested her head against Eli's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd caught that train?" Eli kissed the top of her head. "All the time." "And?" He smiled. "Then I thank God you didn't." Amanda exhaled, slow and deep. "I was thinking about names. For the baby?" She nodded. "Only one came to me. It won't make sense to most people, but it does to me." Eli turned to her. "Tell me." She looked down, her voice just above a whisper. "Rain." Eli blinked, then let out a soft chuckle. "You sure he won't get teased at school?" Amanda smiled. "Only if he forgets what it means." Eli nodded slowly, looking out the chapel door. You think people can be named after the very thing that changed them? Amanda turned to him, eyes shimmering. I think I was. That afternoon, clouds began to gather. Unexpected, quiet. Amanda was on the porch, folding laundry, when the first drop fell. She paused, looked up, and felt another on her cheek. She didn't run for cover. She simply stood there, eyes closed, face lifted, arms slack at her sides. Inside, Caleb watched through the window, eyes wide with excitement. "It's raining!" he shouted. "It's raining again!" Amanda opened her eyes, smiling as the drizzle grew, and Eli stepped out, now barefoot, now laughing. "It's official," he said, pulling her close. She leaned into him, soaked now but radiant. "This time," she whispered, "I think the rain's just for me." Eli looked at her, his wife, the mother of his child, the miracle who had walked into his life when she was deemed too unwanted by a world that had no idea what they were missing. And he saw it all: the woman at the station, the dress in the rain, the letters in the chapel, the home they built with broken boards and borrowed hope. Now, here she stood, washed, yes, but never diminished, transformed. That evening, they sat together under a shared blanket, listening to the soft hum of raindrops on the roof. Caleb fell asleep on Amanda's lap, and Eli lit a single candle near the porch rail. They watched it flicker in the misty breeze, its glow unbothered by the wet. And in that quiet, Amanda spoke. "You know what I used to believe?" she asked. Eli looked at her. "What?" "That life only gave you one great love. And if you missed it, or lost it, it was gone forever." He waited, but I was wrong, she said, smiling softly. Sometimes, life saves the best for when you finally believe you deserve it. He reached for her hand, and under the rain, they sat. 3 hearts, 1 roof, and a future waiting to be written. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop a comment and share your corner of the world with us. It's always heartwarming to see how stories like this bring people together from near and far. And if this story touched you in any way, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. We share true-to-the-heart stories that celebrate kindness, resilience, and the quiet beauty of everyday love. Thank you, truly, for spending part of your day with us. Your presence here means more than you know.